All right, the recording has started, and this is the February 1st, 2021 Crossplane community meeting. I think this maybe is no, it's not the first one we've done of the year. I know we did not have one last time, but we did do one January 4th. All right, sweet. So not the first one of the year. But yeah, so let's get started how we normally do with move off making suggestions. I'm going to do the like the roadmap here. So we put out a 1.0 or the 1.0 right before the holidays, and that was really good to get that out there and have stable APIs and be production ready, etc. The 1.1 milestone here, we've been working towards it, and we made some progress in a couple different areas. Um, I want to talk a little bit about some of the status of some of the areas we're making investments in, and also talk about the release schedule as well too for that. I think the project board might be fairly up to date, I believe, but it might be good to just talk through some of the high level feature areas further down in the agenda as well too. Let me just take a quick look at this here. Yeah, it's provider acceleration stuff, compositions, multi-language support. Yeah, okay. I think this matches the feature areas down below. So let's just dive into that, I guess, and then talk about status and things. Moffic, I should just give you editing permissions instead of just like watching for you to finish before hitting accept.
I'm done now, I think.
I'm done. All right. There we go. Okay, cool. So let's dive into some of the investment areas that we're making for our 1.1 release. Dan, you've been spearheading a lot of the security stuff. Do you want to give us an update on all the cool stuff going on there?
Sure. So most of the stuff is around, I guess, provider authentication right now. So if you're familiar with the current model, we mostly suggest using Kubernetes secrets to provide credentials and reference them from a provider config for each provider, which means, for each resource you provision, you can specify the credentials you want the provider to use to execute that. With that model, right, it requires that you store your secrets in etcd, or if you have a different, backing store, you could use that as well, which is fine in some cases, but especially if you're running in kind of an untrusted environment, you definitely do not want to be, writing secrets to disk or storing them in etcd or something like that. So we've done some work in the past to enable things like IRSA. If you're running on EKS, which seems a lot of folks were interested in. And we want to extend this model a little bit further. So different cloud providers, if you're using their hosted solution, will often have something like IRSA or workload identity that allows you to have your credentials injected into the file system of the container for the provider. And we kind of were manually supporting that. By just adding support in each provider, and we have an injected identity source. But that's not super flexible. We are only kind of adhering to these certain environment variables, for instance, with IRSA that required you to, use the specific paths that the EKS mutating webhook does to put the credentials in the file system. And we wanted basically the ability to have for any provider to have an external system write things to the file system or provide via environment variables or something like that, and be able to generically do that. So one of the things which we'll probably have a TBS episode on pretty soon, that we see folks wanting to do is use Vault to store the credentials for all their providers. And so Vault has a mutating webhook that will put a sidecar agent on your pod and share secrets with it via TempFS. So you need to be able to put annotations on the pod to be able to do that. So if you're familiar with the controller config, it's basically a way to modify the deployment that gets created for a provider that you install. So first step, these are kind of listed in order of how things are implemented. First step is passing annotations to the provider pod. So right now you can pass them to the service count or the deployment, but not to the pod. And we want to be able to do that. So that's a pretty small change. And then with Crossplane runtime, we want to make it really easy to use these different sources. So for secret, file system, and environment, we want to have some kind of like default extractors to get those out. And so now you'll be able to have like a provider config ref and say source FS and specify the path or something like that. And then I've also got a work in progress implementation in provider AWS. So yeah, we're basically just trying to support more ways to provide provider credentials. And if there are some that you don't think are accounted for by this, definitely open issues, reach out. This still has like arbitrary extensibility for each provider, like we've already done with like IRSA and that sort of thing. But hopefully it makes it a little easier to have all these different sources in every provider.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. I definitely think that's an important aspect of this too, is that, you know, the additional affordances that are being added to support, you know, more secure scenarios and keeping credentials out of the cluster, et cetera, is all really good. But, you know, having folks like real use cases, you know, kind of the feedback from the community is super important to be able to understand, you know, are these features being designed such that, you know, in a way that people will use them and be able to trust them and all that sort of stuff. So the community feedback on those is certainly really important. But great work on all that stuff so far, Dan. Cool. So that's definitely a solid thing that's being added in 1.1, that area of investment there. You know, we're still investing in the you know, coverage, code generation, provider acceleration stuff. Moveoff and Casey, do you all want to get us updated on those areas that we're putting some work into as well?
Yeah, I can give a quick update. So I'm mostly working on AWS code generation with the folks from ACK. So right now we have the full instructions step by step that you can start, you know, following and like implementing additional resources that you need. And a lot of folks in the community actually followed it and like opened PRs. So if you go back to the community meeting, you will see like, you know, a bunch of new PRs that are open. Some of them are work in progress, some of them I left reviews. But like, yeah, I mean, right now our approach is essentially, if you need like an additional resource, we can do it via code generation now.
And
so,
often all these are community contributions?
Except SNS, yes.
Cool.
I believe.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's amazing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also like, you know, I encourage people like to try and see like, you know, how they can add a new resource. It's a pretty good contribution and like not a really hard one. So like, you know, there's only some custom parts that you need to read, you need to write. And there's also one work in progress PR that I opened, waiting for review, that updates this code generation document with more details about testing what you wrote. So it should be like, you know, even more straightforward to do that when this PR on this doc is merged.
Is there anything blocking that PR, Moaf, or you just haven't gotten the feedback yet?
Yeah, I just haven't gotten feedback.
Cool. Well, yeah, I definitely think that was a good resource as well too, of having this basically the guide about how to use code generation to, you know, get a new feature or a new service resource bootstrapped, and then, you know, the parts that you need to do to accomplish like by hand to get it to the finish line. I think having this is really, really important to be able to enable or empower folks from the community to be able to add their own resources as well too. So I think that was a really good idea here, and that's awesome that we're seeing some dividends by folks being able, like, empowered to add the resources that are important to them, right, to scale out this this effort here across the community. So that's fantastic. Muaf, is that all for you on your side?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Cool. Casey, are you do you want to give us an update on all the things that you've been putting work into as well?
Yeah, so since ACK is going great, we are, the community day demo was for an AWS provider, but we don't want to move forward with using Terraform code generation for that at the moment, since ACK is looking good. So we decided to focus on long tail providers, starting with vSphere. Phil pulled some data from Terraform, and that was the provider that was the most popular outside of AWS, Azure, and Google. And so I've been reworking the code generation to work with like arbitrary Terraform providers. And so I have resources generated for vSphere and provider config, and now I'm testing to see if it actually works using vcsim, which is a Go program that simulates the vSphere server. There are a few resources that still need additional work. They have the same issues that that prevented us from generating some of the AWS resources. So we'll also get those bugs fixed as in the process of getting the vSphere provider done.
Nice, Casey. That's awesome, man. I definitely like the I like the scenarios that this opens up as well too, of like more on-premises scenarios too, to be able to like provision and manage VM virtual machine resources on an on-premises environment. So that's really cool. Were there any big speed bumps you hit with like using your CodeGen pipeline to do things for a new Terraform provider, or is it kind of like the generalities there starting to get good coverage and not to me unexpected things?
No, I think it's mostly been pretty rote changes, just generalizing things in the templating layer that were that I kind of put in place by hand for AWS. The only thing that I haven't built yet that we will need to build to have the click a button and get a provider tool is the ability to each Terraform provider has the provider itself has a type that is similar to the resource type specified in the same kind of schema, but the shape is different because it's not, we don't have for provider and at provider spec and status fields, and we have secret management kind of baked into that as well. So in the case of vSphere, I wrote that by hand, and then the next provider that we build will actually automate that piece as well.
Got it. Yeah, really cool, man. I definitely like the focus here on another provider here that there's no coverage or like doesn't even exist in Crossplane yet. So that's really exciting. Awesome. Cool. And then another focus area for the 1.1 milestone here is around improvements to composition. Definitely one that sticks out of my head so far that I think has been merged is Kellen's investment there in the bidirectional patching. It is merged, right? So that's really amazing to see, a very non-trivial improvement to like a real feature in the composition layer. So that was really cool to see that, Kellen. Was there anything big that you learned from that experience there, Kellen, or like getting that feature into main?
It was just kind of learning how to claim, controller and composite controller, kind of that functionality. So it was nice to kind of get into the internals there. And to see how some of those are generated, so that way we can have like actual like statuses on XRDs now, and patch information back. So it's pretty cool.
Definitely, yeah, and I appreciate that too as a more of a user of the composition in Crossplane and some of the reference platforms I've been building there to get status, kind of bubbling back this way to to like up the chain there is going to be really useful, like help with troubleshooting and understanding what's going on deeper in the layers there without having to dive hop.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice, Kellen. Great work on that, man. Nick, anything else you wanted to add about composition or improvements that we may be making in 1.1?
Nothing too much. There is at least 2 PRs in the pipeline at the moment. One was I started working on one that would allow you to reorder templates within a composition, which is not in and of itself that exciting, but it opens up the pathway to composition revisions. So letting you sort of carefully roll individual custom resources over to a new composition without necessarily having to, carefully roll individual XRs over to a new composition without having to change every XR that's using a particular composition, if that makes sense. So new versions of existing compositions. I wasn't super happy with the implementation to begin with, and it's going to need a pretty big refactor, I think, now that Kellen's PR is merged. So no guarantees that that'll make it for 1.1. It's not a priority for that release, but it might. It's likely to. There is also, let me pull it real quick. Ben Agricola opened a PR. It was also a composition improvement, and I am going to review it this week, but I can't right now remember what it is. It was allowing the sort of allowing you to patch from multiple fields into one, or to basically aggregate together the output of multiple fields. A specific place this is being asked for in a couple of places is when building IAM policies. Sometimes you might want to put like the ARN of something in an IAM policy, and then there's one or two other things that you want to sort of inject into an IAM policy. We already support sort of a very basic form of templating there, where we'll just let you do a Go string format, but we only let you have one string input at the moment. So we've been playing around with it, if there's a nice way to allow you to say, actually get this field, that field, and that field, and put them all into this template. That's,
is that still in a design phase right now, Nick, you're saying?
No, there is a PR open. For individual sort of little feature improvements like this to composition, we don't require that folks open like a design doc or anything. We typically play around with some different approaches on the issue, which we did in this case. So you can check that check the PR out. That should link back to the issue. And now Ben has a PR open. No, I haven't looked at it at all. I think he said it might be a draft still.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to see another investment there from the broader community into more features for composition. So that's fantastic. I expect to use all of those myself. So awesome. And then Harsh mentioned in the chat too that you started working on the GCP Secrets Manager. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that one, Harsh?
Yeah, Jared. So I started to work on it, and like I got a bit stuck with the proto definitions, like with the secret manager. Like they've used particular types of one-off from Google, and so I'm trying to figure that out. If I get stuck, I'll hit you guys up on Slack.
Awesome, sounds good. Yeah, and thanks for taking that on. That'll be a good addition as well too. Yeah. Cool. And then Phil normally updates us on multi-language support and the ongoing collaboration with Amazon and the CDK. I think. Does anyone have an update on that in Phil's stead? I don't know the current status myself.
I'm afraid I don't either. I know there have been ongoing meetings. I just saw one get moved around on the calendar, but I'm not sure of the status. I don't know if there's been too many developments this year. I think they haven't really had time to ramp back up is my guess, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I think the latest update was like Phil enabling level 2 objects. Like it's basically easier and an easier abstraction for CDKs to use Crossplane objects, but I think that's pretty much it. We haven't made much progress in that regard.
Cool.
As Nick pointed out.
Sounds good. And then in terms of a 1.1 release schedule there, I recall a date being mentioned on that, but I don't remember off the top of my head or where that was published. Nick, do you have an idea of what we're targeting there for a 1.1 release?
That's a good question. I was thinking about it the other day. Given that we released 1.0 on the 15th, it would actually be due pretty soon. I know that Dan has just sort of revamped our release schedule, and I believe we were going for 8 weeks between releases now. So we're going to release a little bit slower than we were previously, with more feature and sort of code freeze at the end than we have historically had. Long story short, I guess it depends. If you say we're taking it from 8 weeks from the start of the year, then February. More realistically, probably about 2 weeks from now, I'd say.
Got it. And Dan, did you was that the clarification around like LTS and scheduling for like support and stuff like that too?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm gonna.
Where is that? Yeah, it's like that one here.
There's actually, I realize there's a few things we should probably cherry pick. We're gonna need to cherry pick back to the the like 1.0 docs more frequently now, as we move forward, since we'll have more longer support for stuff. So this is just on the master branch right now, but I'll go ahead and link it regardless. Let's see here. All right, that should do it.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Yeah, so we are working towards that 1.1. We've already got some features in there. And then we got status updates for pretty much everything that's kind of within the charter of that milestone there. So sounds like yeah, I think like nailing down a more concrete release date would be beneficial, but kind of as we're making a transition here from monthly to a bit of a slower cadence to get bigger features in there, we'll firm that up. Cool. Anything else on 1.1 from people? I don't remember asking my dog down there. Okay. I don't know why she's barking. Okay, cool. So let's move on ahead to the community topics section. The team did a write-up and have already implemented a on-duty rotation. And I think it's working really well as well too. I think that was a fantastic idea. Here is a link to, I don't know why I put a specific hash in there. But here's a link to kind of the expectations, the schedule, everything there. Does somebody, one of the maintainers, want to kind of talk about the experience there so far, or how things are going with the on-duty rotation?
Someone other than me want to comment since I pushed for it?
I've been on for like an hour, so I don't have any feedback yet.
It's been a wonderful hour, Casey.
All right, maybe 2-3 hours, but yeah, nothing.
I think I like it. Like my week wasn't like very busy, so I had time to look at like other things as well with the peace of mind. Like in normal days, you kind of have like the feature requests and all that stuff, like you have to work on it, but on duty is kind of like more calm, so it kind of helps other things as well, like alongside standard on duty stuff like answering people and all that. So I think it's going pretty well right now.
I think my only observation so far is that all of us who've done on duty, including myself, have fallen into the trap of, in our spare time around on duty, working on not stuff that's really improving the future of on duty for other engineers. It's very easy to fall into the trap of being like, oh, I have this half-completed PR that's unrelated. I'll go do that, which is what I did. So do want to try and improve there, but it's a pretty strong temptation, as evidenced by the fact that all of us have given into it so far.
Yeah, and I completely plan to give into that.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a great idea that we did this, where we're kind of putting ourselves, putting the right resources in the place to make sure that the community is getting support they need, and that pull requests are getting reviews, and and that effort is being load balanced a bit as well too. So I love the intention here, and I'm really happy that we drove to make that happen and have codified it and are following up on it. So that's great. I'm really happy that this is going to have a positive effect for us. So that's amazing. Cool. All right. I have a quick update on the Docker Hub, is what I meant to say here. Docker Hub open source project application. So I applied sometime before the holidays. I don't know exactly when, to basically grant status for the Crossplane project within Docker Hub as an open source project, which makes it free from the throttling and quotas, et cetera, that they put on, have recently added to projects or containers images being hosted in Docker Hub. I did hear back from them and recently just followed up with them a couple days ago, last week, I think. And then so they had a long tail of, or a big set of projects that all, submitted applications for this status. And so they're getting to ours. What they said is within the next week. So hopefully we'll get an update about that and be granted that status. One thing that's a bit a bit open-ended right now, is that they have a requirement that the project isn't funded by a commercial organization. And so I kind of pushed back on that and asked for some clarification as well too. And it's still not very clear. They're being fairly vague about that. So I don't really know what the requirements are for that and the impact, et cetera, and any sort of relationships that like organizations that have employees contributing to it, and if that, how that gets into funding. So we need to learn a bit more about that. It seems like the way they originally described it would basically cut out a lot of open source projects, unless it's just like a single project made by a single person out of love. So I'm not sure exactly what the requirement is here, and we'll have to learn a little bit more. But definitely, I think it's over time be nice to potentially find alternate solutions to hosting in Docker Hub, and the Up on Cloud registry I think is very, very compelling for that. Cool. Okay, so any other community topics then? All right. Well, yes. So if we didn't have, do we have any other PRs or anything that folks wanted to bring up here? Any PRs that need some attention or needs a couple comments on? All right. Well, that's everything that's on the agenda document then. We've gone through all of our items there. So we'll keep making progress on the 1.1 milestone there and all of the interesting features here that we've been discussing. So great work from everybody who's contributing in all sorts of shapes and ways to the Crossplane project. And we will see everybody on Slack then. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.